The great British broadband sell off, who ends up owning your internet. If you had fallen asleep in 2022 and woken up this week, you would not recognize the UK broadband market. TalkTalk is being broken into three pieces and sold in different directions. The biggest altnet deal in British history is still waiting on a CMA decision. BT has just spent tens of millions of pounds relaunching the BT brand. The same brand it was quietly retiring 4 years ago, and retail customer bases are being passed around between operators like an unwanted gift. Nobody quite knows what to do with. I have spent months analyzing the UK's operators and altnets on this channel in detail, operator by operator, episode by episode. What is happening this week is the consequence of everything I covered playing out in real time. This is my breaking analysis, and it matters for every enterprise buyer, every investor, and every professional working in the UK telecoms ecosystem right now. Let me start with TalkTalk because the story of what is happening to it is the clearest possible illustration of where the UK broadband market is heading. TalkTalk Group, once one of Britain's largest ISPs, is now effectively three separate businesses heading in three different directions simultaneously. The confirmed deal, TalkTalk Business, is merging with Arrow, the Liverpool based cloud and managed IT provider. Together, they will be a roughly £200 million revenue business serving around 70,000 organizations. The logic is straightforward. Connectivity margins are thin. Managed services margins are less thin. Every telco on earth has had the same slide about moving up the value chain since 2015. TalkTalk Business has actually done something about it. This deal is pending sign off under the National Security and Investment Act, expected by end of summer. The second piece, PXC, the wholesale and network arm TalkTalk carved out 2 years ago, is reportedly in exclusive talks with Octopus Investments through its Fern trading vehicle. Fern already backs All Points Fiber Networks and Warboss, a price tag in the several hundreds of millions. Not confirmed, but Octopus has suspended applications to one of its investment products, citing a material transaction involving Fern. You do not do that for fun. The third piece, TalkTalk Consumer, 1.8 million customers and counting downwards, is fielding interest from Opus Broadband, backed by Alchemy Partners, and from Vodafone 3. Virgin Media O2 looked, considered it, and walked away. Nothing is signed, but the direction is clear. In my UK Telecoms Decoded series, I describe TalkTalk as the most complicated strategic story in UK telecoms. A business with genuine assets, navigating financial constraints in a market getting harder every quarter. What is happening this week is the resolution of that story, not through a single transformation, through disaggregation. Now, let me give you the pattern that ties all of this together, because it is not just TalkTalk, it is the whole market. The UK broadband market is sorting itself into two distinct piles: operators who own networks and operators who own customers. All Points Fiber Networks, one of the altnet platforms I have covered extensively, spent the last 2 years acquiring retail brands. Then it sold those retail customers to others. Cuckoo to Onestream, Broadband to Olilo. The connections stay on the APFN wholesale platform. The customer relationship moves on. APFN has decided it wants to be a network and a platform, not a retailer. And if Fern Trading acquires PXC through the same Octopus vehicle, that starts to look less like coincidence and more like a deliberate strategy. Build a wholesale infrastructure layer. Let others own the customer relationship. collect the recurring wholesale revenue without the cost and complexity of direct consumer relationships. That is a coherent thesis, but it carries a structural risk. When a retailer can move tens of thousands of circuits to another wholesale platform in a matter of weeks, your moat is only as deep as your service quality and your pricing discipline. This brings me to the deal I have been watching most closely because it sits at the heart of everything the UK altnet market needs to resolve. Nexfibre acquired Netomnia for £2 billion. The press releases talk a good game about boosting choice for ISPs and building a genuine alternative to Openreach. But here is the honest reality. Nexfibre's wholesale customer base consists primarily of Virgin Media and giffgaff. That is not a wholesale market. That is a very expensive private infrastructure serving its own corporate family. A genuine challenger to Openreach needs independent ISPs. Sky, Vodafone, TalkTalk, Zen, and hundreds of smaller providers actively choosing to use its network because it offers better terms, better service, and better coverage than the alternatives. Until that happens, the Nexfibre platform is a substantial infrastructure investment dressed up as a market intervention. The CMA Phase 2 review runs until December. What regulators decide about wholesale access obligations will determine the outcome, whether Nexfibre becomes the open platform its founders claim or remains a private driveway. And then there is BT, which deserves its own section because what happened this week is the most visible illustration of how difficult brand strategy is in a commoditizing market. In 2022, BT announced that EE would be its flagship consumer brand. BT would focus on business. Simple, clean, one brand for consumers. 4 years, one CEO change, and tens of millions of pounds of market research later. BT has relaunched the BT consumer brand, revived BT Mobile, and committed to a three-brand strategy. BT for the loyal and traditional, EE for the converged and cutting edge, PlusNet for the price conscious. Three brands on the same Openreach network. Three broadband brands differentiated primarily by marketing tone. And heritage imagery is an expensive way to compete with yourself. Multi brand strategies can work when each brand has a genuinely distinct product proposition and the commercial discipline to stay in its lane. The alternative view, and I go back and forth on this, is that when altnets are nibbling at your customer base, region by region, having three distinct price points and three distinct stories to tell is not indecision, it is a defensive formation. Whether the economics justify the operational costs of three go to market machines is the question BT's leadership will be answering for the next 3 years. Strip away the deal by deal detail, and the direction of travel is clear. The UK built too many fiber networks and too many retail brands for the market to sustain. The market is now correcting in the only way markets know how: consolidation. Networks are merging into a small number of scaled wholesale platforms. Customer bases are pooling with retailers large enough to serve them efficiently. Customer bases are pooling with retailers large enough to serve them efficiently. Brands are being retired quietly and not so quietly. The interesting question is not whether consolidation continues. It will. My view, consistent with the analysis I published across both the UK Telecoms Decoded and UK Altnets Decoded series, is that Britain ends up with 3 or 4 wholesale networks of genuine national scale, a retail layer with fewer but sharper brands, and an ongoing regulatory argument about whether any of this was good for consumers. The consumer angle is the one that troubles me most. Consolidation creates efficiency, it also creates leverage. The fewer wholesale networks there are, the less ability any individual ISP has to move traffic, negotiate terms, or offer genuinely differentiated pricing to end users. The CMA, Ofcom, and the AI Growth Zone program all assume a competitive fiber market. The market being built right now may be rather less competitive than those assumptions require. I have spent months building the most comprehensive analysis of UK telecoms and UK altnets on YouTube, operator by operator, deal by deal, investment by investment. What is happening this week is the consequence of the dynamics I described in those series playing out at speed. If you have not watched the UK Telecoms Decoded or UK Altnets Decoded series, the links are in the description. They give you the context you need to understand every deal being announced right now. And if you are an enterprise buyer, an investor, or a technology professional operating in this market, the consolidation wave is not a background story. It is reshaping who your connectivity partners will be, what their financial health looks like, and how much leverage you have in the conversations that follow. The great British broadband sell off has begun, and who ends up owning your internet is not yet settled. Subscribe to Circle. I will keep tracking every development as it unfolds.